Hello and welcome to Talk Local on Rogers TV. I'm Greg Mercer and I'm glad you could join us. I want everyone at home who's watching to think about all the people in your family that you care about. Now imagine one of them never coming home again. Imagine they just vanish without a trace. For about 18 families in our community, that's a reality. They've had someone they love go missing and stay missing for years. In some cases decades, and often without an answer as to why. So we're dedicating tonight's entire show to these stories. And for those of you who are watching, if you have any information on the missing people we're talking about, you can call Crime Stoppers anonymously at 1-800-222-8477 or the Waterloo Regional Police at 519-650-8500 extension 8655. To help us understand what police are trying to do about these unique cases, we're pleased to be joined by Sergeant Richard Dorling and Detective Les Pike. They're investigators with the Waterloo Regional Police Force's Homicide Branch, and they've taken special interest in these missing person cases. Gentlemen, thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having us.
So first, maybe I'll ask you, Richard, this. What is it about these cases that, some of them, they go back 30 plus years, that now we're trying to get answers on? Why are you taking these on now?
It started with a case back in 2009. We started looking at the missing person case of Dave McDermott, and from there started opening some of the other cases and found a lot of uniqueness to them, and started going into them a little more deeper. Noticed some of the issues that might have been missed originally. Mm-hmm. Things have changed over time. We have new techniques, new attention we can bring to these cases. So we opened a lot of these cases and trying to not necessarily start over, but try new things.
Mm-hmm. And Les, what are some of the challenges you're dealing with? I mean, these are not your typical case.
Yeah, that's correct. The challenges that we face right now is if a missing person is reported, we don't have the same powers in regards to judicial authorizations or search warrants and getting private information from the families, from the loved one that's missing. Mm-hmm. It's hard to prove an offense without a person.
Right.
So that's the kind of challenges that we face. There is legislation in some other provinces that give us or give police the powers to do that, but right now that is not occurring in Ontario.
So if you don't have a criminal offense, what does that mean? How are you limited?
Well, if we do have a criminal offense, we can go to a judge and we can get a warrant, and we can say we need this information and this will afford evidence that will give us, that will advance our investigation. Mm-hmm. With a missing person, even the families will tell you today that they have problems, especially with the new privacy laws, of getting information about their own loved ones. Mm-hmm. So if I would like to check a missing person's health card, for example, right, if I don't have the strength of a warrant, I won't be able to do that. And I can't get a warrant without an offense. So that's an example of not being able to get the information that we need. That is often crucial, especially the health card. If somebody is suffering from any kind of long-term disability or medical problems, chances are they're going to be using that health card somewhere. And if we could check that right off the bat, that would, of course, help us.
Mm-hmm. How much is the time element a problem here? I mean, you are dealing with memories that have to go back sometimes the 80s or 70s. Some of these cases are that old. What are you up against? Well,
some of the cases are very old. Our earliest case is 1978. The example I'll use, Dave McDermott went missing in 2002. Mm-hmm. We had a closer look at the case back in 2008, 2009. Mm-hmm. People's memories are one issue. Another issue is if we want bank records or phone records, that's all gone over a period of time. That information is deleted. Mm-hmm. Not only can we not get a judicial authorization or a search warrant to get those records, but the records oftentimes are gone.
Right. How, for people who are watching at home, how can they help? What do you need from the public?
Well, in regards to the community, like any information is good information, regardless of how much that person may think it's not. Okay. A lot of times people don't understand that this is a big puzzle that we're trying to put together, and we need all the pieces. And that person who may have that little piece just thinks, well, you know, the police already know that, or that person's been missing for such a long time that they must know this already. I really encourage people that have any information about any missing person, give us that information, we will take it, we will work on it, and that might be the piece that we need to put it all together.
Mm-hmm. So no tip is too insignificant, is that fair?
Yeah, it's absolutely correct. Yeah, you never know if someone says, oh, I saw this person and they were with this friend or someone else. We may not have spoken to that person yet, and maybe they have that little piece we're looking for.
Mm-hmm. We're not, and just to clarify for people who are watching, we're not talking about someone who goes missing for a couple of days. You gentlemen are focusing on these historical missing person cases? What's sort of the criteria? Do you have a cutoff for when a file lands in your office?
Well, Les and I both work out of the homicide office, which is investigative services. Missing person cases that would be current are handled by divisional detectives. So in the early stages, a report is taken typically by patrol. It's investigated by detectives. If there's any suspicious circumstances behind it, it would come to our office to put a different type of resource in. It all depends on circumstances.
Right.
Every case is unique. They're all investigated, but it just depends what the circumstances are initially.
What are some of the circumstances that people go missing? I mean, I imagine there's a range of reasons, but what are you dealing with there?
Well, I mean, there's lots of reasons. Sometimes people just get up and walk away. It's hard to believe, but they do, and some are strong enough and willed enough that they do not make any contact with family members. There's mental health problems, and, you know, they just can't go on with life, and they go off somewhere. And of course, there's foul play. And once again, you know, each case is assessed on an individual basis, and that's what we're, you know, assigned to do, to see which one is which and which one gets the resources needed.
Richard, what are some of the tools that you might have now that your counterparts wouldn't have had in the 70s or the 80s trying to solve some of these?
Mostly technology. For us at this point where we're at with these cases, it's social media. It's the news and newspapers, this type of feature, Facebook, Twitter. It's sharing that information in a matter of seconds or minutes. We can have information shared globally.
What about, and I'll ask you this.
Sure.
In some cases, we're dealing with people who have information that involve a crime that's been committed and don't want to talk because it implicates them. How do you get around that? Is there a hope that over time they might open up a little bit?
Yes, or they might slip up.
Okay.
Or they tell somebody and that person tells us. Or their conscience finally gets to them and they come in and come clean with what has happened. Or they somehow get through Crime Stoppers tips. They'll also, you know, give information that way, and they'll try to maybe shade away from what really happened. And once again, that's our job to kind of zero back in on that and get to the truth, because basically that's all we're after. You know, for the sake of the families and everyone's involved, we're just wanting the truth. Whatever that truth is, that's what we're trying to get.
Well, just very quickly before we go to break, what does it mean to you to find some answers here for these families?
A lot of it is personal challenge right now. I mean, I want to have answers for the family, but we, as a police service and as investigators, we have an interest in this, and we've become close with a lot of these families as well.
Okay. Well, we'll be right back. We'll continue to talk about this issue. Back in a moment. Welcome back to Talk Local. Tonight we're examining Waterloo Region's missing person cases. And we're going to start by taking a closer look at one of the oldest ones on the books. John McNichol was the owner of Grandma Lee's Bakery and Sandwich Shop on King Street in Kitchener when he disappeared in January 1978. We're joined now by his sister Marilyn Santos and his friend Paul Heldman to learn more about his story. Thanks to you both for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Marilyn, if I could start with you, I guess I'll ask, what would it mean to you to have an answer in this case? What happened to your brother?
It would just put an end to everything. Like, that's all my mom and dad ever wanted to know. They're both gone now. I often wonder if he's dead, do they now have the answer and we still don't?
Paul, you were one of the last people to see him. Is that true?
Yes.
Can you
I
tell me
saw
about
him.
that?
Well, we had worked together at the Grandma Lee store on a Friday night and went out and had something to eat after working and walked to the corner of Water and King Street and shook hands, and I said to John, I'll see you Sunday to go to the Pro Bowl game, and he said sure, and he went south on Water Street, and I went north to my car, and that was the last time I saw him.
Richard, I want to bring you into this. This is the oldest case that you're trying to solve. What are you up against? I mean, we talked about the time element in the first segment, but really in this specific case, these are some very, very old evidence information you're dealing with.
Absolutely. Example I give you is I open the file and it's carbon copy police reports, which is way before my time. Interesting enough. But then you talk about people's memories. Go back to 1978. I mean, it's when I first spoke to Paul, jogging his memory. I mean, that's my job, is to pull this out of him and try to refresh his memory. And Marilyn too. This goes back a long time. It's definitely a challenge. There's no bank records available anymore. His driver's license photo isn't even there. I had to contact his family to see if anyone had any photographs, because as a police service we had nothing.
Right.
So photographs now, you post that on social media, these are dated photographs. Obviously people change over time. You can put his picture out there to the public, but he may not necessarily look like that anymore.
Marilyn, do you have a theory on what happened to your brother?
Well, it's funny that in these last few weeks, since this has all been reopened, at the time I was never even questioned.
Okay.
I just found out that there was apparently that he left a note. I never knew anything about this note. The police don't have a copy of the note. There was no note in the file. So I just last week gave a sample of my DNA so that they can check places. And
Do you think he's out there somewhere?
well, I really don't think he is, because I just can't believe my brother to my parents was the perfect child. I was kind of the bad black sheep of the family, right? And he was the perfect child, and I can't believe that he could do this to them. And both of them when they were on their dying beds, asked that could we just try one more time to try and find him. That's why I said maybe they have the answer now, and we don't. But now his birthday's coming up in 3 days, so again, it's kind of an emotional time. He'll be 67. He was 31 when he left.
Wow. He's been missing more than he was alive at the point that he went missing. Paul, you were a close friend of his. What do you think happened here? Do you think he walked off? Do you think he is somewhere?
Personally, I only hope that he is somewhere. And it doesn't matter to me because he's gone that long. If he returns to my door, it's open. I would welcome him back. Family, it might have a different story on that, but as a friend, John was an excellent person with me. I enjoyed his company, and I enjoyed being a friend of his. And if he does come back, which I would hope, I would be more than happy to have him.
Richard, I want to ask you, I understand the dental records in this case have long since been destroyed. So what are you left with? You do now have DNA, thanks to Marilyn, but what else do you have to work with?
Basically just people's memory. We will put the information out across Canada and the United States, add it into the databases. Maybe somewhere in Canada, if John's passed away, we're able to match up an unidentified remain file with John's missing person file and at least have answers that way.
And Marilyn, I want to ask you a little bit more about your brother, the kind of guy he was, how you remember him. He had a family? He was a family man?
Yes, he had a wife and 2 kids. They would have been 5 and 8 at the time. It's so hard to believe that he could walk away. I'm finding out so many things in the last few weeks that I didn't know way back then, and when it all happened 36 years ago, no one even came and talked to me.
Right.
Like the police didn't, I think they just wrote it off as a domestic thing, and that was the end of it. You know, but what I don't understand is this note, why nobody's ever seen this note. My mom said she knew there was a note, but she never saw a note. I would personally like to see this note.
And Paul, I want to ask you, the story is that he was in some kind of financial trouble. Does that make sense to you? Is that something you'd heard or he'd talked about?
Oh yes, yes. In fact, that Friday night when we were at dinner, he had mentioned the fact that he needed some money.
Okay.
And I don't know what the exact amount was, but he needed money, and he asked me, and at that point I didn't have the resources to help him. And I said, no, that I cannot help. I'm sorry, but I can't. But the finances of the Grammarly, which was not as successful as what John thought it would be, really drove hard with him. And I believe as the family resulted later, that they knew that it was financially not making any money, and they had owed some bills and so on, and it was hard. It was hard on him. Yeah.
Meryl, I'm going to put the last question to you before we go to break. What has it been like to live with this all these years?
Well, because it's been so long, I mean, life goes on. It's not something that you live every day anymore, but it's always there. You never really forget it. And now last week I went to a meeting with a bunch of people who also have people missing. And by the time I got home last week, it's also, fresh again that I was totally drained emotionally, mentally, everything. It was just, it's very hard, even though you don't live it every day because it's been so long.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. We'll be right back in a moment. Welcome back to Talk Local. We're going to continue tonight's show on missing people now by hearing from Waterloo's Maureen Trask. Her son, Daniel, went missing in November 2011, and we're pleased to be joined by Maureen now, and of course Richard Dorling and Les Pike from the Waterloo Regional Police. Maureen, can I ask you, first off, tell us a little bit about Daniel's, the circumstance around his disappearance.
Certainly. Journey we never thought would happen. In any case, he left the house in his vehicle around 5 to 5 one morning. And at that point, he was living in our house and coming and going as he pleased. And we just thought, well, he's out for the weekend with his buddies or whatever. He'll be home on Sunday. He wasn't home on Sunday. So Monday, we called the police to file a missing persons report. And they sent over an inspector, and we went through that process. Daniel had gone missing once before, much shorter period of time. So we knew some of the process, but it was still very, very unusual. We're racking our brains trying to figure out where he is, what he did. 10 days later, we found out his car was up in Temagami, parked at a campsite there. And the gentleman who works there thought, well, Daniel's out for his last canoe, because he had spent most of the summer up there canoeing solo by himself, exploring, loved it. OPP were handed over the case, and I guess that's something they didn't speak to. Our scenario had a jurisdiction change.
Okay.
So the OPP were consulted. My husband went up with a friend, and they did, the OPP had an extensive search done. Boots on the ground, dog around his vehicle. The folks at Bear Island, which is a native reservation, did shoreline searching, and they were very, very helpful, all of the people up there.
And you're still looking today, right?
We're still looking today. We've done our own searches, and we've had the success of gathering a search and rescue team from Michigan. They are boots on the ground. This is what they're doing. They have 2 searches planned this year, one in the end of May, the other the end of August. So we're up there when that goes on, just help logistically, and it's nerve-wracking. Obviously, the first year is the worst, although Marilyn may be rekindling her first year by the sounds of it. Very emotional, and quite frankly, I was very numb. Our whole family was very numb that first year. It's hard to recollect, so records are very important.
Right. I want to bring the police into this. What do we do in a situation like Daniel's, where he's believed to have disappeared in a different community, in Temagami? There's a missing person report filed here, but what's locally the police role in this?
We just sort of maintain the records. It is a jurisdictional issue, so the report was made here. We take the report, and it seems like the OPP do all the boots on the ground, as you say. They're doing the searching. Daniel's case is unique in that there's sort of a specific area to start looking. So that's what the OPP are doing. From our end, we're collecting DNA, dental, maintaining the file here, keeping it alive from our end. But from ours, it's more just an administrative issue.
Maureen, I want to ask you about this idea, and you have a book in front of you about ambiguous loss. You've talked before about this. This isn't like a traditional death. You're kind of stuck in limbo. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I emotionally, it was a difficult journey, and consulted with the doctor. I didn't want meds, but I need to talk to somebody. Fortunately, one of our other families was trying to get people together. So we connected through Music of the Missing, and I think more will be said about that. Wonderful opportunity to realize that we're not alone, there's other people. So my next question was, where do we go for counseling? Well, traditional counseling don't understand. This isn't a death. We don't have any ending here. We don't have any ritual through a funeral or a burial site that we can visit. So we're in limbo. And Pauline Boss is the one who did research and coined the phrase ambiguous loss.
Okay.
Learning to live with unresolved grief. So what's happening is if we go to a traditional counselor, they're going to say, well, this is the things you need to do so you can move on to the next stage or the next step. There are no stages or steps here. We are continually living in limbo, frozen in our grief. And what we have to do, what Pauline Boss is saying, is we need to find meaning in this uncertainty. And I guess my journey is trying to build a network in our community that can support families with missing loved ones. We've been successful in your media series, and that was wonderful to raise awareness. The police have been engaged with us in 2 group sessions now to try and identify what are the priority items we need to clear roadblocks and or make it better for the next family, because there will be a next family.
And I want to ask you about that, Les. How much would it help from a policing point of view if there is this sort of support network for families? Do they have a role to play? I mean, you folks deal with the investigating, but is there a role here for families?
Absolutely, there's a role for that because, like she said, they're frozen in their grief. They even don't like the term closure. It's an ongoing process, and they need that support. And the more support they get, the easier it'll be on them through a very tough process. And you're right, that's not so much of our job as it is other trained professionals. We are out there trying to get to the truth.
Just very quickly, Maureen, what would it mean to you to have an answer?
We all want the answer. Whether it's death or took on a new life somewhere else, we still need to know. It's very difficult. If I were to say to Daniel, if Daniel was watching this, I'd want him to know it doesn't matter why he left. What matters is we're all here, we still love him, and we want him in our lives.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it at that. I wish we had more time. We'll be back in a moment. You're watching Talk Local. I'm your host, Greg Mercer, and we will return. Thanks. Welcome back to Talk Local, where we're continuing to talk about the region's missing person cases. We're joined now by Linda Shaw, who's the mother of David McDermott. He went missing after raining on the town in November 2002, and we're going to learn more about his story. Linda, thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
Maybe just to start us off, give people a quick glimpse at home of who your son, who David is. How do you remember him?
Well, David was a great outdoors person, loved fishing, very family-oriented. We always got together, holidays and everything. Family was very important. He loved pets. Like he had 2 dogs, and they were basically, if you wanted to say David was ever going to have children, dogs were his children.
When he first went missing in November 2002, how long was it before you started to worry that something's not right here?
I was at work, and my daughter, Colleen, gave me a call and asked if I had heard from David within that week. And And I said, no, why? And she said, well, like we're filing a missing persons report, that my one daughter, Rhonda, had done so. And I went, well, why? Like, that's... And she said, well, he was supposed to show up to cut her hair, or my son-in-law's hair, and he hadn't done so. He was supposed to play hockey, which he did every season with his cousin, and his cousin was picking him up on the Sunday morning, and he wasn't there. So that's kind of how it went down.
I want to bring the police into this. When this case was initially filed with police, it was a missing person case, and it was updated a few years later to, as I understand, a missing person with suspicious circumstance. Can either of you talk about that? What happened there?
Yeah, I can say that initially in the first days, this is a good example of the report being taken that here's a man that wants to just go to Algonquin Park in this case. This is how the initial information came in. Dave just needs to get a break and go away. But you need to take the family's word for it, their gut feeling that there's something wrong. So that was 2002, it was initially investigated. In 2008, some information came forward, kind of by like a tipster, who said Dave had been murdered and brought some information to our attention. We investigated that very thoroughly. We were able to disprove the original theory, or this tip that was brought forward, which led us in a different direction. Could still say that Dave's disappearance is absolutely suspicious. We can't say for certain that he was murdered, but there's someone out there that knows exactly what happened to him.
Do you have a theory, Linda, on what you think happened to David?
Well, a theory, the only theory we have is we know as a family if Dave was out there, there's nothing that would keep him from contacting us. He was very close with his grandmother as well. The November that Dave went missing, my children and my husband both went through very critical issues. Just a couple months prior, my two girls were in a car accident, and Dave was around constantly to see how they were recouping. That happened in June, actually on my birthday. And then my husband had a heart attack in September. And Dave again was constantly around. So for Dave to just suddenly, no, family was too important to David.
Les, I want to ask you this. I think I read something in the range of 200 interviews have been done on this case. That's a lot of people that you folks have talked to. What's missing? What do you need? Does someone know something? Is that what we believe here?
Yes, somebody knows something, and that information has just not come forward as of yet. And once again, like we said earlier in the program, someone knows something, and they might not think it's a whole lot. It may be a whole lot to us. And if they come forward with that through Crime Stoppers or any other way, that would be helpful. But yes, there are people out there that know something.
What's it been like living with this, Linda?
Well, you have every birthday that comes around, every Christmas that comes around. My youngest daughter just finished 4 years of university. David's missed all this. Dave was my only son. I have 4 daughters. I have 1 son, my firstborn. That's been taken. And just for the person, whoever it is, to come forward and say, you know, they know what happened for sure, would just take us out of this limbo that we're in.
And your family, as I understand, has done a lot to try to find David. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the stuff you've done over the years?
Oh, we've had searches. When I worked for one company in Waterloo, Conestoga Rovers had developed a website, and we had put up a $10,000 reward when Dave was first reported missing. So we've tried to, like, posters went everywhere. it's shared consistently on Facebook. We're part of the group that Maureen has set up, and you just keep talking about it. Like, we won't stop. Like, you can't stop. The pain, like, I swear I will not die until I know what happened to my son.
Richard, I want to ask you about his last night. We believe he was at Elements nightclub in Kitchener. How important of a detail is that?
It was actually Club Renaissance
Sorry,
on
my
Charles Street. He had been out with a friend celebrating a birthday, had ended up at this bar for a period of time. I think that's key information. Here's a group in the public who may have specific information. If anyone recalls even seeing him, who he was with, who he was talking to, we've spoken to some of these people, but there's always other witnesses there. Somebody knows something. So it's important information that he was last at Club Renaissance on that Saturday night into Sunday morning. How did he leave? Did he walk? Did he take a taxi? Did he leave with a friend? And who did he leave with?
Well, just very quickly, Linda, what would it mean to you to have an answer here?
Peace. Just peace. That be whatever the case. I firmly believe in my heart Dave's no longer with us and hasn't been since 2002. We keep going through hell on a daily basis. You move on with your life, but again, like, remains are found, or a song comes on the radio, Christmas comes, another graduation happens, another birthday goes by. You'll never forget them. And I don't believe anybody else does either.
Okay, we'll have to leave it at that. Thanks so much for coming on to talk about this.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Talk Local. I'm your host, Greg Mercer, and we're going to continue tonight's show on Missing People Now by talking to Lindy Smith. She's the stepmother of Tasha Smith, who went missing in December 2010. So, thanks so much for doing this.
You're welcome.
Let me ask you a little bit about the circumstance around Tasha's disappearance. Tell us what happened. She walked away from a domiciliary hospital?
They call it a group home. It's
Okay.
not. It's not. There's no trained staff in it. It's run by the Region of Waterloo. It's there is no housing for people with mental illness. So this is where they're put. She was in St. Joseph's in London and released in November 5th of 2010, and placed in this group home, for a better word. And she had, we'll just call it meltdowns, total meltdowns, was re-hospitalized twice and then released back to the home. And then December 1st, she was released from the hospital, went back to the home, and I was called the next day and said, we haven't seen her since last night, which was a shock to me because I had in place certain safeguards to make sure that if that happened, if she walked away, that I would be able to find her. And it never happened.
Didn't work. I'll ask you more about that in a moment. But Richard, I do want to ask you the element of mental health, and you're up front that Tasha had mental health
Yes, she did.
struggles. How does that add some unique challenges to this case?
I'm so glad Lindy brought it up, the mental health issue, because I think in the initial stages, when you and I first met, it was something we didn't disclose right away to everybody. And then at some point you said, what's the point in hiding this? Why be ashamed? People
Yeah.
are who they are. Mental illness is very common. Let's get that information out there. It's quite possible that Tasha is living somewhere in Ontario even and just doesn't know who she is. Has a different name, has taken off a different identity, changed her appearance, maybe weight's fluctuated. Fortunately, Tasha has a very unique tattoo, and we keep sharing that information. That someone has to see a woman with this tattoo, and hopefully that information comes back to us.
Can you tell us about that tattoo?
That's Tasha had been in the hospital quite a while, and I had promised her, stay with the course. Stay and do your treatment to the very end, and I will get you whatever tattoo you want. So this was in she was in North Bay when she was released. We came down in March, and she got this big, beautiful, I believe it's on her right arm, and it's a big skull. So you can't miss it. It is really a nice tattoo. But with Tasha, when she went off her meds, it's a given that she will not know who she is. When you're on that many meds and you all of a sudden are just not on it, she would have gone through horrific side effects, first of all. She will not know who she is. She wouldn't have known how to get home. Without the meds, her weight absolutely would drop. But she liked to change it up. She loved to be different. And if you can tell by all the pictures, she liked all the big makeup. She liked different hair. She just loved it. So she will look, and she could change her looks every day.
Les, from a police point of view, how does that make it difficult for someone whose perception of reality is challenged and they change their looks? They may not, as your partner said, may not be aware of who they are.
Well, that is challenging, especially if they're presenting themselves as a different person. But like, once again, we go back to perhaps hospital records, because Tasha would need her medication. And if something bad happened to her, she would have to go to a hospital if she had some kind of accident or something like that. If we could get a hold of those records on a more consistent basis, then we could look at that. And the same thing with that tattoo of a nurse as seen her or a doctor as seen her, and maybe she's not Tasha, maybe somebody else. Maybe somebody say, well, you know what, I had a girl named Jen with this tattoo, maybe that's Tasha.
Lindy, can you tell me a little bit about the things that you and Tasha's father have done to try to find her? Because you've done a lot.
We did a lot because she'd been in the hospital in London. She knew some of the patients were from Woodstock. She's from North Bay. She's lived here in Kitchener. She lived in Cambridge, so where do you look? Where, honestly, do you look? I've been down the streets of Toronto, North Bay, London. I've called every food bank. And it gets to a point where she could be a block ahead of you or a block behind you. Toronto's a big city. And you have to step back for a while and focus your energies somewhere. For me, it was taking a look at how my case was being presented, how the police were dealing with it, which in the beginning wasn't well, at least. And so I funneled everything into Music for the Missing. Because you're numb and you're alone. And if it's just you and your husband walking the streets with your family and friends, you still don't know what to do next. So I created Music for the Missing to bring everybody together. But it also gave us a springboard for more ideas. And with Tasha, with my case not being handled the way I felt it should be handled, it now gives us a better understanding of where to go with the Waterloo Regional, because I believe that we're working with 3 of the best. But it gives us a firm understanding of where we can go and what changes we can do within the police department itself for the next family. Nobody should have to go through what I went through. Nobody.
Well, just a last thing, Lindy. I want to ask you about something you raised before the show, about this idea that you'd like the public to maybe take a second look when they pass along the street.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us about that?
Because before Tasha went missing, I'd read about a missing family in the newspaper, and I'd say, oh, that poor family, and I'd turn the page. We all do it. You'd buy a cup of coffee. Do you look at that person that you're buying the cup of coffee from? If I asked you tonight who served you this morning, could you tell me? You walk down the street in Toronto, and people are really disrespectful. That is somebody's loved one. I don't care if you've, done anything illegal. I don't care if you've done drugs. Somebody loves you. And this is what people have to remember. It's a whole respect thing. I don't care. It's somebody's child. It's somebody's loved one. And that's what we need to think about when we see somebody on the street. Are they missing?
Well, we'll have to leave it at that.
Absolutely.
Lindy, we really appreciate you coming on to
No
talk to us.
problem.
We'll be back after the break. We're back, and you're watching Talk Local on Rogers TV. We're going to end tonight's show talking about missing people by looking at the case of Sandy Apt. who vanished under suspicious circumstances from his trailer in Puzzlage in 2008. And remember, we always want to hear from you about what you're hearing on the show, and we'll get you some contacts in a minute. But I do want to bring in Sandy's sister, Jackie House. Thanks for coming on, Jackie.
Thanks for having us.
I'll ask right off the bat, what do you think happened to your brother?
I honestly believe that he has been murdered. A lot of things kind of led up to he had gone to jail a few years back for dealing cocaine, and he had been extorted, I feel, for, like there's a lot of proof and things, somewhat. And I just know he wouldn't have disappeared. I know for sure that he's definitely been killed.
Why do you think that someone would want to kill him?
Well, there was a lot of the situation with him before he went to jail, and doing a lot of selling a lot of the drugs and stuff. When the police raided him, busted everybody, he still had that amount that the police took, and rather than being that rad and whatnot, he decided to just take the whole thing for it, and he still had to pay somebody for all that went missing from the police and whatnot. So they basically made him pay for the product that he didn't even have, that it was in police custody.
Okay, I want to bring in Sergeant Richard Dorling from the Waterloo Regional Police. You've spent a lot of time on this case, as has Les Pike, detective. We don't believe that Sandy has just gone into hiding. There's a belief that he was met with foul play. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Jackie summarized it quite well. A lot of things point to the fact that he was involved in crime, obviously, got himself into some debt, was paying off his debt. At some point, I think somebody made him pay for his debt, pay with his life.
Over and over.
It certainly could be the case where, you beat somebody up and all of a sudden they happen to die from their injuries. People panic. What do you do? Well, unfortunately, people make the choice to, say, dispose of a body or put someone where they're not going to be found. Unfortunately, we believe that is quite possibly the case of Sandy.
I want to bring in Detective Les Pike. There was, a few years ago, a moment where you thought you may have found Sandy. Can you tell us about that?
That's correct. Back in 2010, there were some found remains located on Greenhouse Road. And actually, that's where I met Jackie. Jackie actually drove out and had heard it on the news and spoke to me about Sandy. And I'm sure we'll speak about that before, but that's what these families go through when found remains come up. Right away, they think, is it my loved one? Everything fit in regards to the Sandy App investigation, to the location, circumstances, and I was not 100% sure, but I was quite certain that DNA would match with the found remains with Sandy. However, that wasn't the case. It wasn't Sandy. It turned out to be a different person. But once again, that's the kind of thing that these families go through, and you try not to get the family hopes up, and I was quite honest with Jackie with what we were dealing with, but deep inside I was saying, well, I think it's him, and it turned out it wasn't.
And Richard, you've talked about this idea of trying to get families off that roller coaster. What kinds of things are you talking about?
Well, it's a personal goal of mine that when remains are found throughout the province, that we can have the answers to give to the families before they have to call us. We can't stop the roller coaster and control people's emotions, and there will always be concerned or alerted to these issues, but we're trying to get all the dental and DNA to get the match made as quickly as possible to either prove or disprove, so that families don't have to go through this, and they have some faith in us that we're going to do that, and as soon as we have something that we can offer them, we will call right away.
Jackie, I want to learn a little more about your brother. Yes, he was a man whose drug debts had kind of taken over his life, but he was more than that, and you've talked about that. Tell us who he was.
He was an amazing, he could do amazing auto body and paint. He was a phenomenal artist. He had a great big heart. He used to take my daughter to chapters and things. They'd read together. Growing up, he was dyslexic, so he kind of taught himself how to overcome that, and that was just him. Any challenge, he would take it. My daughter and I and him would go camping. We'd take a few days, we'd go away. He was just, you just never expect. You see the pictures, the tattoos, and the hair and stuff, and you'd think he's some mean guy, but he was really good, and he would give you anything.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they took so much from him that he became a shell of a person by the end. There was just nothing there.
What would it mean to you to have an answer?
Well, I mean, I won't stop. You know, if there was an answer, I know I would still be listening for all these other families out here too. But just, I mean, I just need to know something. I mean, I know like what things he did were wrong. They were not worth his life. And I just the knowing, I think, it'll always haunt me, even when I do know, I think. But now it's just, I mean, you go out there and you hear things, so then you check it out and you drive out there yourself and try to find out all those questions. And they've been awesome with, I can call them or text them at any time because I think I hear something or know something, and because a lot of times it's hard for the police to find that out.
I wish we had more time. We're going to leave it at that. But Jackie, thanks so much for coming on. For Richard and Les, we really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
That's all the time we have for tonight's show, folks. But remember, if you know anything about these cases we've been talking about tonight, you can always call Crime Stoppers anonymously at 1-800-222-8477 or Waterloo Regional Police at 519-650-8500, extension 8655. And we also want to hear from you about what you're hearing on the show. You can tweet us at TalkLocal at Waterloo at WR. We'll be right back.